Queens stayed dark that night. Old buildings near the tracks, brick, rust, and small churches with red doors that never closed. Wind from the river carried the taste of pennies, curtains drawn, nothing moved. A bell from St. Aurelian rang once, footsteps followed. Slow, even. The stair groaned. A knock came, soft against the door. Father Francis stood there with rain on his coat and gray in his hair. Lines on his face looked carved, not aged. He waited without asking to come in. I opened the door wider. He stepped past me and set a plain envelope on the table. He spoke low, calm, the way a man prays to keep his hands steady. "There are 3 rules," he said. Rain crossed the window in thin lines while he told me. Do not ask why. Do not keep anything from the dead. Do not pray for them. Each rule landed like a nail against the wood. I wanted to ask who they were. He answered before I could speak. They were the kind who had made the faith bleed, and would make me bleed too if I waited. Then silence filled the room. He turned toward the door, said I should read the page when he was gone. Travel light, trust hunger over comfort. His steps went down the stair. The sound faded until only the rain breathed. Paper waited. The envelope tore easy under my thumb. No seal, no crest, just weight. Inside lay a page and a small card. The card carried a number that would ring once and die, and an address in Rome. The page began with a line written in plain English: "To save the faith, purge the flesh." 12 names beneath it. The first was Martin. A photograph was taped beside the name. A man in desert light, a wide hat, a smile that never reached his eyes. At the edge, another shoulder cut by the border, my own shape in shadow. Cold moved through me. The room leaned. Train wheels screamed outside and were gone. A second slip hid behind the list. Only one sentence there. A file called God from the Archive. No place, no code. The rules waited where I had left them. Do not ask why. Do not keep anything from the dead. Do not pray for them. Simple words, hard edges. The map on the wall pulled my eyes. Lines I had drawn years ago. New York to the sea, across the Atlantic. The path felt alive again, like an old wound itching under the skin. Curtains shifted. The radiator clicked. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger standing too still. The envelope rolled tight in my hand and slid under the loose board by the table leg. The floor accepted it without sound. A bag waited on the bed. Cash. A passport that still passed. A knife with a dull handle. A sweater. A photograph of my mother before she knew what I would become. The corner phone stood silent. Numbers turned. One ring. Deadline. Back home, ink bled as I wrote Martin on my palm. Letters sank into the skin like seeds. The bell from down the block rang once more. I counted trains. 1, 2, 3. 3 rules. 3 beats to remember. Code on. Page folded into the inner pocket. Lights off. Air from outside pressed cold and metallic through the crack in the door. The hall narrowed like a tunnel of bone. Lock clicked. Steps down. The street was empty. A bus moved like a shadow and was gone. The church light burned steady under rain. Father Francis waited there as if time had not passed. He watched me come close and said quietly, almost kind, "Keep your soul light." Then he turned away and left me to the night. Streetlights spread across wet concrete. The city behind me felt already old. Cold air off the river, then airports, then nothing but sky. I slept through the flight to Prague and dreamed of trains under water. Morning there came pale and slow, stone streets still wet from night rain, the sky the color of steel. I followed the map Francis had given. Kinsky Institute for Antiquities stood at the edge of Old Town, tall gates, walls the color of bone. Inside, the air was full of dust and quiet machines. No guards, only the hum of lights and the smell of paper. I showed a false pass at the desk. The woman there barely looked up. Her eyes had the flat shine of someone used to ghosts, files stacked high, names that meant nothing. but one drawer carried a mark I knew. Martin K. The same face from the list stared from the folder photo. He had not aged in 20 years. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Light shifted. Martin walked in with a folder under his arm, older than in the photo but still sharp around the eyes. He stopped when he saw me. No alarm, no fear, recognition. "You found me," he said. Voice dry, almost amused. I said nothing. He set the folder down and opened it with slow hands. Inside lay photographs of a desert site. Pillars, broken wings carved in stone. At the center, a figure half human, half something else. He touched the image like it might still be warm. "They told you what I am," he said, not looking up. "They told you I betrayed them?" His smile twitched. "I only tried to wake the one who sleeps." I lifted the pistol from my coat. He did not move. The air thickened, heavy with age and dust. He whispered something that sounded like prayer, then said, "You were there too." The words cracked through me. I told myself he was lying. He slid another photo forward. 2 men in desert sun, backs to a ruined wall. One of them, him. The other, me, or someone who wore my face. Same scar under the eye, same stance. The room tilted again. A hum filled my skull, old metal in my teeth. For a moment I saw heat and sand and 12 figures kneeling around a coffin made of glass. Then it was gone. Martin closed the folder. "You do not remember," he said softly. "That is mercy." I pulled the trigger. Sound cracked through stone. Paper flew from the desk like birds. He fell without a sound. The bullet left a small dark sun on his shirt. Smoke drifted up in slow spirals. The echo took its time dying. I looked down. His hand still held the photo. My own face stared back at me, eyes silver in the reflection. The window beside me trembled from a passing tram. Outside, tourists crossed the bridge under umbrellas. Life kept its rhythm. Inside, the air hung still. I gathered the folder and flipped through the last pages. Each file bore a number instead of a name. The 11th was circled in red ink. On the back of the final page, one sentence written in plain English. "The flesh will remember before the soul does." A siren started somewhere far away. I set the folder on the table and took nothing. Rule 2. Blood crept toward the edge of the desk and touched the photo. The ink smeared, making my face blur into his. I stepped back and wiped my palms on the coat. The building hummed, a low electric grief. In the hallway, the lights flickered. Voices came from above, muffled, moving closer. I took the stair down. Rainlight followed through the glass roof, pale and cold. Each step echoed like a countdown. The street outside smelled of wet stone and old paper. A tram passed, bells clanging. No one looked at me. The city had learned not to notice. I crossed the bridge before the sirens reached the block. Water below moved black and slow. Wind rose from it, sharp with iron. For a heartbeat, I saw a shape on the far bank, someone standing in the mist watching. Then it was gone. Paris moved like a dream half forgotten. Rain on stone, cars whispering through narrow streets. Every sound carried an echo of bells. The name Catherine sat heavy in my pocket. A small convent in the Latin Quarter held the address. St. Margaret Home for the Silent, iron gates, a single light near the door. The air smelled of wax and cold bread. I knocked once. A hinge sighed. A woman in gray opened the door. Her hands were thin, her eyes wide but empty of fear. She told me I could wait in the chapel. The corridor was narrow, lit by candles that burned too low. Shadows bent on the walls like shapes that wanted to breathe. Catherine knelt near the altar, younger than I expected. Her head bowed, hair cut close, black as soot. She did not turn when I came close. Light from the candles trembled across her face, pale skin, no reflection in the pupils. They were white and soft like glass. Her voice came small but clear. "You followed the list," she said. It was not a question. My breath caught. "You know why I am here?" She smiled, faint and calm. "Of course I do. You are one of us." Something in the way she said it made the air colder. She lifted her hand and traced a small cross in the air between us. Not the right kind of cross. The lines met at strange angles. I felt the weight of the pistol inside the coat. Her voice barely rose above the candle hiss. "We were built to end the lie. You cannot change that." The candles tilted. Flame slid sideways like it was afraid. Somewhere deep in the convent, a bell rang 3 times. The sound moved through the floorboards and up my legs. 3 beats. 3 rules. She turned at last. Her eyes glowed faint under the wax light. "Do you remember the sea?" she asked. "I remember drowning." Her lips curved, gentle, forgiving. "But we did not die, did we?" The pistol came out without thought, metal cold against the air. She did not flinch. The shot cracked through the chapel and echoed against stone. Smoke drifted toward the altar. She fell sideways, robes folding like gray water. The candlelight flickered once, then steadied. Silence. Only the smell of powder and old incense. I lowered the gun. A streak of wax had melted across her cheek. Her hand still made the wrong cross on the floor. Footsteps ran somewhere behind the walls. Doors opened. Voices rose, then stopped. I stepped back into the shadows near the pews. A book lay open on the lectern, pages thin as breath. Inside, 1 page marked in red ink. Not words, only numbers. 11, 10, 9. The line under 9 was smeared with gray. I closed the book and left it there. Rule 2. The corridor felt longer than before. Candles shivered as I passed. One went out, smoke curled like fingers along the ceiling. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the air still glistened. The gate creaked as I pushed through. A tram bell sounded from somewhere far off. I walked until the city lights broke into color again. A cafe sign flickered red and white. I sat by the window and watched people who still believed in normal hours. The waiters brought coffee. I could not taste it. In the glass, I saw my reflection. For a breath, the eyes were white. Then the street light changed, and they were mine again. I pulled the list from the coat. Catherine's name was there, crossed in pencil, not ink. Someone had marked it before me. I pressed the page flat and wrote a line beside her name, only 1 word, done. The candlelight from the cafe counter trembled on the window. Rain returned, slow, soft. Bells began again somewhere deep in the city. 3 rings. I listened until the last echo faded. Then I stood and left the cup half full on the table. The street took me east. The sound of the bells followed until it was lost in the wind. The rain in Paris stopped the same day the letter came. Plain paper, no seal, only a time and a place in Rome. The words were clean, careful, like they knew I would not refuse. Flights blurred, metal seats, cheap coffee that burned the tongue. When the plane landed, the sun over Italy looked too gold to be real. I rented a car that smelled like smoke and drove south until the city opened around me. Rome never sleeps. It only turns slower. Streets twisted under archways. Every wall had eyes. Some were statues, some were not. Francis's house waited in Trastevere, on a street too narrow for taxis, a small building with blinds always half closed. Father Francis met me at the door. His coat hung heavier this time, his hands darker with age. "You have been seen," he said, voice quiet. The air in the room held incense and fear. He poured 2 cups of dark wine. I did not drink. Another man sat in the corner. Gray suit, cold eyes. Francis introduced him as Raymond. No handshake, no smile. Raymond watched me like I was a specimen. He said Vatican wanted an extra pair of eyes on the work. His tone made the word work sound like sin. He slid a small radio across the table. Old style, black, 1 frequency. "Use it when you move," he said. "They will know where to find you if you stop answering." His voice was flat, trained, Not Italian, maybe American once, the kind that forgot warmth long ago. The wine glass in front of Francis trembled. He told me Raymond would handle travel, contact, silence. Then he said something that felt rehearsed. Trust him as you would trust me. Raymond looked at me. No one should trust anyone, he said, tone like a door closing. The night came faster in that room. Francis left before the hour turned. Raymond stayed. He sat near the window, watching the street without speaking. I packed quietly. He did not help. He only said one thing before I turned off the light. Do not dream tonight. Sleep came thin. Voices tangled behind the walls. One of them was mine. Morning hit pale. Raymond was already dressed. He handed me an envelope with train tickets and another list. The next name, Wesley. Egypt. I asked how Vatican moved this fast. He said nothing, only tapped the side of his ear. A small device glimmered behind the skin. Then he smiled without humor. We left the apartment. Rome smelled of dust and gasoline. Pigeons scattered over the rooftops. At the train station, he walked ahead of me, always half a step faster. The platform was crowded. He waited until the train roared in before he spoke again. You think you are killing strangers, he said, but they all bleed like mirrors. I wanted to ask what he meant. He was already walking away. The whistle drowned his steps. I boarded alone. The car was half empty. Glass rattled as the city shrank. Mountains rose out of the haze. I watched reflections slide across the window and blur together. Sometimes it was my face, sometimes his. When the sun dropped, the radio in my coat clicked alive on its own, a single breath of static, then a voice that sounded like Raymond's, but slower. It said my name once. Arthur. Then silence. The dial burned warm under my hand. The next station came hours later. I stepped off to stretch. Raymond stood on the opposite platform, though he hadn't been on the train. He lifted 2 fingers to his ear, then pointed to the sky like a signal. Clouds covered the moon. When they passed, he was gone. I slept little that night. Dreams moved too close, hands under water, a shadow with my voice saying the rules again and again. By morning, the car smelled of metal and rain. I turned on the radio. Nothing, no static, only the faint sound of breathing that was not mine. The road to the airport wound through low hills. The sun tried to rise but failed. Every time I checked the mirror, I half expected to see him there. Once I did, or thought I did. A flash of a gray coat, then the car behind me turned away. In the parking lot before the terminal, a message waited in my name. Typed, unsigned, it read, "The eye watches the hand. The hand forgets who it serves. No address, no date." I lit it and let it burn in the car's ashtray. Rule 2. Do not keep anything from the dead. Smoke curled up, slow and blue. I watched it until it disappeared into the vent. The engine started under me like a prayer with no faith left in it. Somewhere behind, I thought I heard the click of a radio switching on again. A whisper said my name, softer this time, like memory trying to stay alive. The sky above Rome stayed gray. I drove toward it and did not look back. The air in Cairo hit like a wall, dry, heavy, full of dust that never settled. Even the light felt tired. I rented a Jeep that rattled with every mile. The road south to Luxor stretched empty except for heat. Sand rose in slow breaths across the horizon. The address on the paper led to nothing, just a camp half buried in wind. A crooked sign read, Aurelius Excavation. Tents leaned against the sun. One generator coughed itself awake and died again. A man waited near the dig trench. Tall, thin, hat pulled low. He did not wave. I knew it was Wesley before he spoke. "You are late," he said, voice dry as sand. He turned back to the pit without looking at me. Canvas flapped behind him like broken wings. I asked what he'd found. He said nothing for a while. Then he pointed to the shape in the ground. A coffin made of glass, cracked, empty. Wind hissed through it like breath. They took the body years ago, he said, but the imprint remains. I moved closer. The glass was warm under my glove. Inside it, faint outlines, 2 arms crossed, feathers scattered. Human, but not. Wesley opened a folder and laid photographs across a crate. Faces, men and women, 12 of them. Everyone wore my features, some older, some younger, all the same eyes. He watched me read. They call us vessels, he said, voice almost kind. Each made to carry a piece of what they worship. The flesh remembers. The soul follows. I asked who made us. He smiled like he'd been waiting for that. You did, he said. You just do not remember yet. Heat pressed down until the world bent. I saw sand swirl into shapes of people kneeling, their mouths full of light. When I blinked, it was gone. The wind picked up, tents snapped. He gathered the photos and held them out to me. Take them, he said. Proof helps only the living. Rule 2 cut through my head. Do not keep anything from the dead. I left the photos on the crate. He kept talking, words pulled apart by wind. You think you are killing them, he said. You are only pruning yourself. Something moved under the sand. A low hum crawled through the ground. I drew the pistol without thinking. The shadow near his feet stretched, long and black. He looked at me with calm pity. I told you, he whispered. There were 12. The gun kicked once. Sound tore the air open. Wesley fell back against the crate. Dust leapt around him like smoke. Silence came hard. The generator died again. Heat rolled through the trench like breath from an open grave. I knelt beside him. His eyes were still open. They reflected the cracked glass behind me. Silver, not brown. The folder had fallen to the ground. One page drifted free. At the bottom, written in small letters, Subject 11, Violent Loyalty recorded after field termination. The words looked old. The ink faded. The 11th, it sounded familiar. Like something I had heard in a dream I could not remember. My hand shook. For a second, I felt another pulse inside my chest, out of rhythm with mine. The sand under my knees moved, a faint vibration, like something waking below. I backed away. Heat blurred the air. Wesley's shadow stretched across the sand and touched my boots. I stepped out of it. The rule repeated itself until it hurt. Do not ask why. Do not keep anything from the dead. Do not pray for them. A dust storm rose from the west, fast and wide. The camp vanished in red haze. I took the jeep and drove blind. Compass dead, sky gone. Static burst from the radio in the dash. One breath, then a voice. Mine, or something that wore my tone. Do you remember the desert? It asked. Then silence. By the time the wind stopped, the road was gone. Only sand. The sun bled into the horizon like a wound that would not close. I kept driving until I saw lights again. A small town, a hotel that leaned, a cross hanging sideways over the door. Inside, the air smelled of old stone. The clerk did not ask for a name. He gave me a key that already had fingerprints on it. Room 11. The number felt heavy in my mouth when I whispered it. 11. I locked the door and sat on the bed. The pistol lay on the table, still warm. Dust crawled through the window like thin smoke. In the mirror across the room, a man sat where I sat, same clothes, same face. But his eyes were silver, and he smiled. I looked down. The list in my pocket moved as if it was breathing. Sand spilled from the fold. I told myself the heat was playing tricks. Then the whisper came again, right behind my ear. A single word, carried by the wind. Brother. I turned. Nothing. Only the sound of the desert trying to remember me. Rain turned the cobblestones slick. Every reflection looked like an open eye. I kept the coat tight and moved through alleys that smelled of stone and candle smoke. The sky was a lid that would not lift. The sanctum archive sat behind a wall of pale marble. No sign, no guards outside, only a door that needed a name and a handprint. Raymond's card still opened it. I had not seen him since the train. Maybe that was the point. Inside, the air hummed low, like a prayer fed through machines. Rows of drawers stretched forever, each labeled by number, each whispering when I passed. I told myself it was the ventilation. A woman in a gray uniform looked up from a desk. Her badge showed no surname. She nodded once, slow, as if she had been waiting. Then she walked away without a word. I found the section marked 1950, files sealed with wax, numbers in faded ink. Hands shook as I reached for one stamped with red. Inside, photographs and typed pages. Project Resurrection. The first line stopped me. Human replication through divine residue. It sounded like a sermon written by a surgeon. The next pages showed faces, 12 of them, all mine. Different ages, different scars, all with the same mark behind the ear. Footsteps came from the next aisle, soft, slow, too sure. I froze. A voice followed, low and careful. Curiosity kills faith, Arthur. Raymond stepped out from the dark. He looked clean, rested, calm, too calm. The small device still glimmered under his skin. You should not be here, he said. His tone had changed, not warning. Command. I asked what they were. He smiled faintly. Subjects. Soldiers. Echoes of the first believer. He moved closer. The church needed proof that purity could be built, not born. You were proof. My chest felt hollow. I said he was lying. He shook his head. You think memory makes you human. It was written into you. Like code. He reached for the file. I stepped back. The page trembled in my hand. On it, a name I almost recognized, followed by a single note. Subject 11. Stable aggression, loyal beyond death. The handwriting felt familiar. Too familiar. Something inside me shifted. A crack I could not find but could feel. My throat dried. The hum in the room grew louder, like something waking behind the walls. Why me? I asked. The words came out quieter than I meant. Raymond almost looked sorry. Because you survived the purge, he said softly. Because you were not supposed to. The lights flickered. A siren pulsed somewhere deep below, muffled but near. He turned his head slightly, as if listening to a voice I could not hear. Then he whispered, They're coming. He vanished into the aisles before I could follow. Only his footsteps remained, fading like a confession swallowed by stone. I moved faster. Another file lay open on a nearby table. The handwriting was different, not typed, old, a journal, ink browned with time. The words shook on the page. The angel's blood binds to human flesh for 1 generation before corruption. Clones must destroy each other until purity remains. My throat closed. Pictures fell out. 12 figures in a circle, half in shadow. In the center, a coffin of glass. Inside it, light shaped like wings. The same dream I had seen in the desert. Not dream, memory. Machines clicked alive around me. A red light swept the hall. Doors began to lock one by one. I ran. The alarm's voice was calm, mechanical, almost kind. Unauthorized access will be purified. I reached the end of the corridor and pushed through a half-open door. Stairs spiraled down. Cold air hit from below. The stairwell smelled of ozone and dust. At the bottom, another room, older, walls black with soot. Here, the records were written by hand. Candles burned without flame. Shadows on the wall moved even when I stood still. A single file sat on the podium. No number, just my name. I opened it. Inside, a photograph I had never taken, me standing beside Bishop Garrick, his hand on my shoulder. Behind us, the same coffin of glass. A voice rose from the dark, not Raymond's, older. Yet, smooth. Loyalty is holy, Arthur. Curiosity is sin. I turned, but saw nothing, only smoke twisting into a shape that almost smiled. The air thickened until I could taste copper. My lungs burned. I slammed the folder shut and grabbed the candle from the altar. Flame finally caught. The smoke drew back like a living thing. The page inside the file curled and blackened. Ink bled into firelight. The last words I could read before it turned to ash. Only one shall stand before the altar of dawn. I dropped the folder. Fire climbed the shelves. Paper screamed as it burned. The air filled with dust and light. I stumbled up the stairs before the ceiling fell. Outside, night had come without warning. Rain began again. Smoke rose behind the wall of marble, thin and white. I stood there until the sirens grew close. The rules repeated in my head, steady as breath. Do not ask why. Do not keep anything from the dead. Do not pray for them. I broke all three before the fire reached the roof. The bells of St. Peter's rang somewhere beyond the smoke. Each note sounded like a warning that came too late. I walked until I could no longer see the flames, only the glow on the clouds above the city. Smoke from Rome still clung to my coat when I reached Paris. The train windows showed only fog and my own reflection. Somewhere in it, the fire behind me kept burning. The name below Wesley's on the list was Megan, a street address written in a hand too neat to trust, the Latin Quarter again. Rain followed me there like memory. Her apartment sat above an old bookstore. The sign hung crooked. Inside, paper dust floated like snow. Someone had been turning pages long after closing. A bell chimed once as I climbed the stairs. The hall smelled of ink and candle wax. When I knocked, a voice answered, calm and clear. "Come in, Arthur." The door opened before I touched it. Megan sat near the window, blind eyes turned to the light. She looked younger than her file photo, hair the color of ash. A band of cloth rested loosely around her neck. "I heard the fire," she said, smiling faintly. "Rome is missing some of its secrets now." Her hands traced symbols on the table, thin lines cut into wood. I asked how she knew my name. She laughed once, soft. "You talk in your sleep, even when you are awake." Books lay open around her, old tongues rewritten into English. She ran a finger across one page and stopped. "They called it Project Resurrection," she said. "I called it a prayer written backward." I told her I needed to know what we were. She tilted her head as if listening to a far sound. "The text said there would be 12 born from the angel's blood," she whispered. "But the words changed each time I read them. Sometimes they said 11, sometimes 1. The air moved between us. Outside, thunder rolled slow across the roofs. She touched the scar behind her ear. "We were never meant to live past recognition," she said. "When you remember who you are, the body starts to end." Her hand found mine. Cold skin, pulse faint but there. "You have already begun to remember, have you not?" I looked at her and saw the same pale glow I had seen in Catherine's eyes, the same calm before surrender. She opened another book, pages brittle. A single sheet tucked inside held the words, "Only one shall stand before the altar of dawn." She said it aloud, voice trembling like wind through glass. That line was not prophecy, it was instruction. Lightning hit somewhere close. The room flashed white. When sight came back, she was crying without sound. "I tried to translate it," she said. "I failed, because it was never written for humans." I asked where she found it. Her smile returned, tired. "Soren gave it to me." The name stung. She nodded, reading my silence. "He said you would come. He said you would finally see the mirror." The window cracked with thunder again. Rain started hard. Somewhere below, a car door slammed. Footsteps climbed fast on the stair. Megan rose. She reached into the drawer and pulled out a thin envelope. "Take it," she said. "It will lead you to him. The rest you already know." I told her to leave with me. She shook her head. "They are already here." Then, almost gently, "Remember the sea." Glass shattered as the door burst open. Two men in dark coats entered. They moved like they knew the room by heart. Megan stood still. They did not look at me. One raised a silenced pistol and fired once. Sound folded into itself. She fell before the echo reached the walls. The candle on the desk went out. I shot back without aim. One man dropped. The other vanished into the stairwell. The smoke smelled of burned paper. I knelt beside her. Her blood spread across the symbols she had carved. The lines closed, turning into words I could not read. A low hum filled the room, deep and hollow. The books trembled. I took the envelope and stepped away. Rule 2 whispered behind my eyes. Do not keep anything from the dead. But I couldn't leave it. Not this time. Outside, rain washed the street clean of voices. Sirens grew in the distance. I walked until the sound flattened into the night. Under a street lamp, I opened the envelope. Inside, a photograph, a mountain range dusted with snow. At the bottom, one name written in neat letters, St. Ulrich Monastery, Austria. The streetlight flickered. Water dripped from my sleeve onto the picture. The ink ran, but the name stayed clear. I folded it back into the coat. The rules came again, quieter now. Do not ask why. Do not keep anything from the dead. Do not pray for them. Thunder answered each line like agreement. When it stopped, I felt something move in the reflection of the puddle near my feet. For a moment, it was her face, not mine, staring back. Then, the light changed. Only water remained. I kept walking until Paris disappeared behind the rain. Snow came early in Austria. It fell without sound, thick enough to erase the road. Mountains rose like walls around me. By the time I reached the valley, night had already taken the color from everything. St. Ulrich Monastery stood half buried in ice. Windows black. Roof broken by time. A single bell hung silent above the gate. The jeep refused to start again after I stopped. I left it there. The wind carried no smell, only cold. Every step up the hill sounded too loud. The front doors opened with a long cry of hinges. Inside, darkness folded over itself. Dust and frost covered the pews. Candles leaned in rows, long dead. My flashlight caught a cross carved into stone at the far wall. It was not the church kind. Angles wrong. Lines twisted back on themselves. Footprints led deeper into the hall. Fresh. Someone else had come before me. A corridor branched left into what had been dormitories. Beds rotted, walls written over with numbers 9, 10, 11. The pattern stopped at 12. A faint hum started somewhere below. The same low vibration I had heard in the desert. I followed it down a narrow stair hidden behind the altar. The steps ended in a room cut from rock. Candlelight moved along the floor, though no candles burned. At the center stood a table covered with dust. On it, a single folder, my name written across the front. I opened it. Pages filled with notes in my handwriting. Dates, locations, names already crossed out. At the bottom, a line I did not remember writing. Finish what I began. The air thickened. Whispers slid through the dark, too many voices at once. I turned. Raymond stepped from the shadows, coat torn, face pale. He looked more machine than man now, eyes hollow, mouth tight with static. He raised a pistol and held it steady. "You were not supposed to find this place," he said, his voice cracked like metal. "They built us to erase the proof, not to uncover it." I told him Megan was dead. He nodded once, almost kind. She was never meant to speak. None of them were. He took one slow step closer. "You have seen what you are," he said. "End it before it spreads." The hum beneath us deepened. Dust fell from the ceiling. I caught a flash of movement behind him, something like light twisting into form. He turned too late. The beam from my flashlight caught his eyes. Silver, same as mine. I fired. The sound cracked through stone. He fell without a sound, blood dark against the frost. For a heartbeat, he smiled as if relieved. The floor trembled. A line of fire raced through the cracks around the table. The folder flared open, pages lifting in heat that came from nowhere. Letters burned themselves into the wall above the altar. The 11th must finish what I began. The words pulsed once, then faded into the stone. The air glowed faintly blue. Smoke rolled from the corners of the room, moving against the wind. It curled around Raymond's body and lifted it an inch before letting it drop. Something behind the wall groaned like a deep breath. Stone shifted. Part of the ceiling opened to reveal another stairway leading even lower. The hum turned to a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat under the earth. I followed it down. The chamber below was vast. Rows of statues lined both sides, each one missing its face. In the center stood a slab of glass blackened with age. When I brushed the surface, frost melted away to reveal an outline of wings, human bones beneath. A reflection moved across the glass. My face, then another layered over it, older, sharper. Soren, his voice came from nowhere. "Brother," it said. The echo carried warmth and hate in the same breath. "We are almost whole." Wind rose from the pit below, cold and electric. It smelled like blood and rain. The light flickered until the chamber stuttered between day and night. I felt something behind my ribs pulse once, too strong, too wrong. When it stopped, I was alone again. The air settled. The hum died. Only the faint ring of the bell above the mountain remained. I picked up the folder. Half the pages had burned to ash, but one sentence stayed clear. "The first waits for the 11th beneath the cross that bleeds." Outside, dawn tried to climb the peaks. Snow turned pink under the new light. The bell rang once more, slow, as if it remembered its purpose. I stood at the gate and looked down at the valley. Smoke from the chimney curled white against the sky. For a second I thought I saw movement there, a figure walking out of the snow toward me. The shape was familiar, my own height, my own walk. The wind erased its face before I could see. I started walking toward the sound of the bell. The mountains never stop echoing. Every sound comes back changed. When I woke, the snow outside the monastery had buried the jeep. Morning light was gray and thin. The air tasted like iron. The list felt heavy in my pocket. Only 2 names blurred under the fold. I could not tell which one would come last. The trail led into the forest behind the abbey. Trees stood black against the sky. Every branch carried snow like ash. Tracks cut through the path ahead, boots steady and straight. I followed. Hours passed. The forest opened into a clearing where the ground dipped to reveal a cracked stone floor. At the center, a cross of metal sunk into the earth. It bled rust. Heat rose from the ground. Snow melted in circles around the cross. Something waited below. A stair spiraled into dark. The air smelled of smoke and age. When I reached the bottom, torches burned with white flame. Their light did not flicker. It only hummed. Soren stood at the far end of the hall, older, eyes silver, calm. He looked like a reflection that had stopped obeying the mirror. "You made it," he said, voice deep and almost kind. His hands were bare, no weapon, only the calm of someone who already knows how it ends. "You are the first," I said. He nodded once. "And you are the last that matters." The room pulsed with heat from nowhere. Stone glowed faint red under our feet. The walls breathed. He walked closer. Every step echoed twice, as if another followed behind him. "I built the 12, he said. "I gave them my blood and their orders. They were supposed to die before they began to think." His smile cut the air. "You were different. You believed. You always believed." I said nothing. He stopped an arm's length away. I could see the lines of veins glowing faint through his skin. They looked like script written under flesh. He raised a hand to my face. "For years I thought the church controlled us. Now I see it was the faith itself. It eats what it creates." I caught his wrist. skin cold as stone. Our eyes met, silver on silver. The hum in the floor grew louder until the torches shook. He whispered like it was a blessing. There can only be one believer. Then he moved. Fast. The knife came from his sleeve, a flash of light. I turned and the blade cut the air beside my throat. We crashed against the altar. Dust fell like snow around us. Every blow landed with the sound of metal breaking. He was stronger, but I had nothing left to lose. He caught me by the collar and drove me against the stone. "Do you know what you are?" he shouted. "A body that forgot it was holy." I saw the reflection of both of us in the cracked glass above the altar. Same faces, same eyes. No difference left to believe in. He pressed the blade to my chest. It burned instead of cutting. Light poured from the wound, but no blood. He leaned close. "Now you remember," he said. The light moved between us, white and cold. The hum turned into a scream only the walls could make. I pushed back with everything that was still human. The knife slid through his ribs. His breath caught. He looked almost grateful. "You were the best of me," he whispered. "Now you are me." He fell against the altar. Light spilled out and crawled across the floor like water. When it reached the walls, the torches went dark. Silence. Only our breathing left. Then his stopped. I knelt beside him. The silver faded from his eyes. For a second, I thought it passed into mine. The light behind my ribs pulsed once more and settled. Smoke rose from the blade. I let it drop. The echo of metal against stone felt like a door closing. Around us, the air shimmered. Images moved inside the haze, faces of the others, one after another, fading like dust in sunlight. 12 down to 1, always 1. The ceiling cracked, snow and moonlight poured in together. Wind screamed through the hole. It smelled of salt, of the sea I'd forgotten. I looked at Soren's body. It was already changing, sinking into ash that glowed from within. When I touched his coat, it crumbled. No heat, no weight, only white dust left on my hands. In the broken glass above the altar, I saw myself. For an instant, the reflection smiled back. Not my smile, his. The bell from the monastery rang once, faint under the storm. It sounded almost human. I left the hall before the roof fell. Outside, snow covered everything again, hiding blood and footprints. The list in my pocket was warm, edges curling, the last line still hidden by the fold. The wind rose as I walked down the mountain. Each gust carried whispers that sounded like his voice, soft, close, still alive somewhere in the dark behind me. They ordered me back to New York. Said the work was almost done. Said the last name would find me there. Queens had not changed. Same gray sky, same rusted train lines cutting through the fog, the same church bell that rang once every night, even when no one pulled the rope. My apartment waited like a confession booth. Curtains drawn, dust on everything. Only the map on the wall looked alive, its pin still bleeding rust. I set the list on the table. The paper was thin as skin now. 11 names crossed clean. 1 left hidden under the last fold. The room felt smaller. Even the air avoided me. Rain started against the window, slow and cold. It sounded like footsteps. I poured a drink and waited. For what, I was not sure. Orders, forgiveness, maybe the sound of my own heart giving up. Hours slipped. The city outside blurred into streaks of light and noise. Midnight came and passed. The candle burned low. I finally opened the fold. The last name stared back. Arthur. For a moment I could not breathe. My throat locked. The sound in my chest was hollow, mechanical. It felt like something breaking that had waited years to fail. The ink was fresh, still wet. Someone had written it after everything ended. The Vatican never forgot to finish what it began. I read the word again and again until it stopped being a name and became a sentence. Arthur, the executioner and the condemned. The circle closed without mercy. I sat there for a long time. The glass shook in my hand. I thought of Francis, of the first rule he whispered like a prayer. Do not ask why. Maybe that was the only way they ever survived their own guilt. A low sound rolled through the floor. An engine, tires on wet asphalt, headlights cut across the window, then stopped. I did not move. The air shifted. Footsteps approached the door, measured, slow. Through the window, I saw him, a man in a dark coat standing under the rain. In his hand, an envelope sealed in red, the same mark that had once sent me across the world. His face hidden by shadow, but the way he stood, straight, calm, inevitable, I knew what he was. He lifted his head. Our eyes met through the glass, silver to silver, the same reflection I had seen too many times before. The room went silent. Even the rain stopped listening. In that moment, I understood. I was no longer fighting for Vatican orders, no longer chasing sins they had written for me. Now, I fought for something smaller, something that still breathed inside what was left of me, myself. The candle on the table trembled once and went out.
Hello, Arthur.